Hi everyone, I'm Justin, and this is episode 1 of Adventures with Justin Smith Photography. In this series, I'll show the full process of creating a photo of a beautiful location, from initial conception to finished product. Along the way, I'll share with you interesting things I find, and it's an adventure because I don't know what will happen. I could get eaten up by a bear, hopefully something less extreme for me. For my next photography objective, I have wanted for a long time to capture a scene of the Milky Way. Been doing photography for about 10 years, and this is still something I haven't done yet. So hopefully this happens. I looked at a few options for this next adventure, and let's go to my map now, and we'll take a look at where I'll be headed. So the plan for this hike is to go to Shoal Pond, which is visible right here. Stay there for the night and get a shot looking south on the Milky Way. You can see all the way down here, Mount Kerrigan. And so from this direction, it should be visible, the Milky Way over it. So to do this, I'm gonna start here at Willey House and park here for the night. I'm gonna hike up. It's a very steep trail. Hike up to here, and around here things will start to level out. I'm gonna take the Ethan Pond Trail over here. This shouldn't be too bad. This should actually be pretty easy getting to here. I'm gonna spend the night there, and then on Sunday, the plan is to go back and hike up to Mount Willey just to get some exercise done, and then hike back down and be done. So here we go. About to begin my long drive up to Crawford Notch. Hopefully we'll be there before 2. That would be really good. And we'll check in over there. So I am here, the incredible Crawford Notch. It is much later than 2 o'clock, which is not a good thing. But we're going to try and do this anyway. I have to hit up some pretty steep stuff up that way. Fortunately, I have to do it with all of this on my back, so it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm just going to try and do it. Well, we are at our first stream crossing of the day. You can see how it comes down through the steep rocks. This is actually a place that has a name. Not sure if you can see it, but it says Cadron Flume. And downstream, it appears to go over a cliff. You can see the mountains across the notch over there. I'm pushing along. I think I'm going to make it in time. Well, time to move on. Just stopping for a minute to point out, going through one of the... it's interesting, when you're hiking the White Mountains, frequently you go through a transition from one type of forest to another. So down below, we've got all the northeastern lowland forest, just a lot of hardwood trees, deciduous trees. And to my right, the uphill, it's full of spruce. You get a lot of moss, interesting plants that don't grow down below. This is the boreal forest that we're just coming into now. Just stopping for a moment to say I got to the first trailhead. So I've gone 1.3 miles from Willey House, and I've got another 1.3 to get to the Ethan Pond campsite, and then I have another 2 to get to Shoal Pond. So we'll see about that. It's not going to be anywhere near as steep from here on, so it should be much faster. So as you can see, I am almost to the Ethan Pond campsite. Just wanted to stop because I'm in this really beautiful stretch of boreal forest. There's lots of open spruce trees, lots of moss. There's a trail going back. So I'm almost there, but I am not sure about going to Shoal Pond at this point. We'll see. I don't want to be setting up the tent in the dark. So this is not Shoal Pond. This is Ethan Pond. I have decided that I think Milky Way is looking pretty unlikely for tonight. So I'm not going to go to Shoal Pond. I'm going to stay here. And there's still a chance of a sunset here, so I may set up here for sunset. I'll be staying here overnight. There's a nice shelter here. A few other people are staying here too. But just wanted to show the really beautiful pond. So I was getting ready to set up my tripod here, and I'll show you what I almost bumped into. It's right down, just hanging out there. So let me try to find somewhere else to set up. I don't want to bother him. He's not hurting anybody. All right, so I've got it all set up here. Yeah, ready to go. We're set up on some rocks down here. I set up here because I like this rock over here in the lower corner, lower right corner. And I like this rock over here in the lower left corner. So I think it makes a pretty good balanced composition. Still not sure about the sky. We'll see what it looks like. Give it some time. It's still pretty early. Hey, so I got woken up, and it's really early in the morning, and there's something really cool down at the pond. I heard some splashing. Check this out. That's a big moose. Morning. So I have decided to head on up to Mount Willey. So I'm going to go do that. I've left some of my weight at the cabin. It's a good idea not to. This is a pretty tough trail, so I will check in later. So I said it was steep. Here's where the trail goes up really steep. A lot of nice moss over here. Yeah. A lot of thick trees. But yeah, it's going to be a climb. So just never know when you're going to find some wildlife. And here we get little hoppy toad. It's a little hard to see, but it's hiding right there. So we are now at the part of the trail that is so steep they've installed ladders. See way up there. It's gonna be a tough climb. Humidity is not helping today either. It's really humid. So I'm pretty close to the summit. Just wanted to say there's a lot of beautiful mushrooms on this trail. And yeah, they look kind of white in the sun, but there they are. There's been a lot of them, a lot of different kinds of them. So here I am. This is summit cairn of Mount Willey. I made it. It's not much of a view, as you can see, but let me show you what's less than a minute walk from right here. Yep, so this is the view from just to the east of the summit. See all the way down to the road there. Or that way you can see, just barely see the cliffs of Mount Webster, and then the rest of the Presidents off that way. Very hazy today, but still, this is awesome. So I made it back to my truck. Absolutely exhausted. I think I'm gonna go find some pizza or something. Sounds pretty good. Alright, so let's get started with Lightroom here. We have 4 images here. I've already gone through and selected which set of these I like the most. Generally based on the patterns of the clouds. I like how these look the best. This is going to be a little easier than some of the other images that I've done because in this case there's no focus blending to do. All of the images are of the same focusing distance. That's because there wasn't anything really close to the camera, so it's a little bit convenient in this case. I am still blending for exposure. Got the dark exposure here for this detail in the sky, and then the lightest exposure is to bring out detail in the background, some of the rocks here. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I should mention I have not gone through these and done this ahead of time, so I'm not entirely sure what the final product is going to look like. You're seeing this done in real time. I also have to apologize in advance if there's a hum in the background. It's about 90 degrees here and I don't have AC, so I have a fan running in the background. Alright, let's take a look what we have. So my goal here is I really want to bring out the different colors in the sky. We've got some nice warm colors, especially on the horizon here. Some of the clouds up here have some good warm color. There's also the shadow areas that I want to sort of use as contrast to that. So we're going to sort of fiddle with it a bit here first. Just want to take a look and see how changing the temperature affects that. And see that we could make it really warm, and we can make it really cool. Maybe just a little bit cooler than the default, just so that I have something to work with processing. Just make it a little bit warmer. And I think we're going to leave the tint where it is, but let's just see. Yeah, see, that doesn't look right at all if we move it that way. It's too green. If we go this way, maybe just a little bit of that. Started at plus 14. Let's leave it right there. We're not going to do anything with the exposure here because this exposure is meant for the sky, the reflection of the sky, and that's pretty much spot on with how I want it to look. What I am going to do is bring down the highlights just a little bit so that we can get a little more detail out of the brightest part. I'm going to skip all of the rest of this, and I'm going to go here to the colors. What we want to do is we want to make the oranges a little more orange and the areas that are not as orange a little bit less. So if we go to the reds, again, I'm just using trial and error to see which areas are affected. I don't really like anything the reds are changing. Probably going to be the oranges that are going to be affected the most. So yeah, we can punch that up a little bit. We don't want to go too far, because if we go too far, then it starts to look a little silly. But if we go here, just kind of stop a little bit less, right about there. We might also want to do the yellows. Let's see what's... Yeah, actually, yellows we can punch a little more. It doesn't change too much, but I do like what it's doing. And then for the blues, well, let's see if we can convert some of the purple to blue. So we'll go over to the hue, and we'll try and pull this a little bit this way, and that's not really having much of an effect. Alright. Yeah, so let's leave that alone and try it with the magenta. It might actually be... That's not really doing anything either. Alright. Well, those are things we can also fix in Photoshop. So sometimes I try to do things in Lightroom first, but if I can't, then we'll do it in Photoshop. So that's about all for that. We'll go down here and we want to get the lens corrections, and that's everything we need for that. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is select all of these, and we still have the dark one selected. So we're going to go in and sync. It's just going to copy those adjustments to all 4 images so that the colors are changed the same way. Make sure we've got the lens corrections too. We want to make sure we've got those. Alright, so we want to synchronize. That should take just a moment here. Looks like that's done already. And the only thing we want to change is if we go to the bright one, we don't want, remember how up here with the highlights, we don't really care about the highlights because we're not going to use the highlights on this image anyway. So let's move this back to 0. We do want to bring out a little bit of the shadow detail just to get whatever wasn't already covered by this being a bright image. So I'll lighten that just a little bit, not too much. Again, we don't want to overcook it. All right. So I think the Lightroom adjustments are just about done. So what we're going to do now is just select all of these, and we're going to go edit in Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. So that's going to move all of these to Photoshop. It might take a minute here to load all of these in. I'm just going to wait. Okay, so we want to get these all into one file. So I'm going to rename these. So I have a way of naming when I'm doing stacking of any type. Usually I use E because this is an exposure blend. And this is the darkest one, so I'm going to call it 1. So we'll just do E1 and save that. And then we'll go to the next and call this E2. And now we're gonna go here and go duplicate layer and put it over into the first one. So if we go back here, you can see that we have both of them. So we can close this one now. And this one is E3. Layer, close it, and E4, duplicate layer. Alright, let's close those, and I just remembered I just need to change one little setting here. I'm going to pause that. That's my my backup software. What's going to happen is as soon as I save this file, this backup software would try to upload it to the cloud. And while it's doing that, I'm unable to save the file again. So that would cause a problem. Since it's a large file, it takes a long time to upload, and it would prevent me from saving. So I've just paused my backup program so that I can do this without a problem. So now that we've got all 4 images, we're going to go ahead and save this. And let's see, we want to put this. I'm going to put this in the same folder that the original images are in. And this we should be able to fit in a PSD. Sometimes you have to use the large document format. I only usually do that if I'm doing both blending for exposure and for focused, since that usually requires a lot of layers. But in this case, we're only doing 4 layers blended for exposure. So PSD should be large enough to do this. So I have a naming convention that I use, but I think in this case, I'm just going to call this what it is. This is Ethan Pond. And this is the second time I've done an image from Ethan Pond. The other one was way back in, I believe, 2014. So we're going to save this as Ethan Pond 2. And these files can take a while to save. So we'll just sit here and twiddle our thumbs a little bit while it's doing that. We can also close Lightroom while this is going on because we don't need to use Lightroom at all. That might save a little bit of memory for this. Yeah, I'll leave everything else open though. To save time in this video, I'm probably only going to save it one more time before the final version, just because I don't want to make everybody wait while it's doing this. Okay. All right, so we've got the images. So what we want to do now is start the process of selectively masking these. So first thing I'm going to do is just mask entirely out each image. So I'm doing this by going down here and clicking on the mask, and then Control-I, just to invert the mask to black so that it completely shows what's under it. So now we're back to seeing only the bottom image. All right. So what we want to do now is sort of just bring back this layer here, and again I can toggle it with Control-I. Now we do have some cloud movement between. Basically, we're going to keep the sky is going to be entirely this image. The bottom one, we're going to use this part will be from the bottom image, but below that down here, we're going to use the lighter exposure. That shouldn't be a problem because this area here, as you can see, doesn't really change much from one to the other. All right. So the process of doing that, let's go back here. We want to select the dark area here, even these parts here. So we're going to make a luminosity mask for this. There's a bunch of ways of doing this. There's a lot of automated ways. If you've downloaded the actions by Tony Kuiper, you can definitely use those to do this. I don't have those, so I generally just make these manually. You can do this, so you can select. If you just hold Control and click on the RGB layer, that'll select the brightness for the image. So it's making a selection based on brightness on the image right now. And then we go down to mask, and now we have a mask for the brightness layer. Now this is probably pretty close to what I want as far as defining the edge here where the sky is and getting most of this. What I am going to do is I'm going to adjust the contrast so that we make sure that we're not getting things we want and getting everything that we do want. So let's just bring this over. We're masking out the really bright areas. So we pretty much got the whole sky. There's a little bit that's showing through here. We can go in and paint those in after. And same to go down here. Now, in doing this, we've also made this brighter. So we're going to bring this over. It's going to be pretty extreme. That's about right there. So that's a pretty solid mask. Again, we're going to come through and fix this bottom area afterwards. I just want to make sure that we get all the stuff with these trees, the horizon over here, and also on the reflection. That's pretty solid. Now, we actually have, this is actually a reverse, an inverted image of what we want, because where it's white is what's going to get painted. We don't want to paint on the sky here. We already like the sky. So we're just going to go Control-I to invert it. And then we're going to select this layer. Go back here and click on the mask. And we want to hide the selection because it's kind of annoying. And we want to pick the white color here, like we've already got. All right. So for this, usually you're going to want fairly heavy brush. I use a Wacom Intuos 3 tablet to do this. You can definitely use you can use a mouse if you want, but I generally find that it's a lot better using the tablet. Just you have much more control. You've got the pressure sensitivity. So let's take a look at what happens when we do this. I'm not expecting everything to be perfect on the first time through here. So we're just gonna paint across here. Oh yeah, we're actually supposed to be we're painting in the shadow area. So let's go through and do that first. And you'll see that it does lighten up a bit. A lot of this is still going to be pretty dark. But the important thing is that we're not really painting. See where we go over, we're not worried about what we're doing to the sky in the background. Now it is lightening up that back there a little more than I like, so I might go through and edit that a little bit. Let's see. Just want to take a look at what we have here so far. These we want pretty much to be as light as we can get. Yeah, see there's some reflections starting to come out there. We're getting some of these lily pads. Alright. Yeah, so right over here we've got a little bit of a problem with the lighting. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to that brush. And let's lower the opacity a little bit. We'll go to 33. And we're just going to kind of decrease the brush size and try and bring some of this back so that it's consistent with the rest of the image. And the same goes for that distant range on the horizon. We want that to not be too light, although it should be lighter. Atmospheric haze will cause that to happen. That's good. And this over here also kind of got a little hazy. So we're just going to kind of go in and adjust that as well. Alright, and it's pretty good. Let me just take a look. You can turn off layers by clicking it here. I think, yeah, see this did lighten up a little bit, but I think it's okay. It's still a lot darker than up here, so that's not a problem. So I think we've got this layer taken care of. If you're curious what your mask looks like, you can alt-click it to see the layer. So you can see how we've kind of gone through. We did paint a little bit up here, but don't feel that it's a huge problem. Down here, I'm not sure I like all of that sky being affected. Let me just take a look and see what that did over here. Yeah, we're going to bring some of that back because that got a little bit too light over there. So I'm going to go here, just try to paint back in along these edges here. Yeah, right like that. Alright. And alright, so we've taken care of that. And now what we want to do is, I think I'm pretty comfortable with the sky and the reflection. We don't actually need too much more. I don't want this area to be bright. It's, I mean we're in the evening. It should be pretty dark, but I think I do want this at least one more level brighter. So we're gonna go to here, basically just repeat the process. Switch back to white. I'm going to leave it at 33% because I don't want to overdo it. So I'm just kind of lightly doing this. I'm not going too heavy in here. You can go a little heavier in the darkest areas, even though So I'm also kind of painting texture into this by selecting certain areas that look like they're more lit up by the light. You can see how I'm doing that. It's kind of like that. On the side of the tree up here a little bit. This side over here, and on the side of this tree up here. Just kind of to give a sense of the lighting. Again, this is not finished at all, so don't worry too much about that yet. And I'm gonna brighten this a little bit, but not too much, because yeah, actually I don't like what that's doing, so there's definitely glare that's coming through that's making that not work. We're going to paint that back out. I think we're just going to leave this part of the horizon up here distinct. It's okay. There's atmospheric haze again. It's a normal. Alright. I do see some details over here that I just want to bring out a little bit. Not too much. This is in the shadow of the sunset, but I can bring out a little bit. Just like that. And then we're going to come through, and again, I want these rocks to be fully painted in, so we're going to come through and do that. And we're probably going to end up having to come back and adjust some of what this is doing to the water. But as long as it stays darker than the sky, I'm generally okay with it. Actually a pretty big change right there. I may have to, I'll have to go back and fix that. A little more reflection here so that the rock is a little more defined. Alright, well, let's switch back here. I just want to, this got a little bit too hot over here, so we're going to bring some of this back, just so that it's at least as dark as, a little too much there. Yeah, pretty much like that. Alright, I'm just looking at it. Looks like we've got a little too much bright, a little too dark over here. Actually very little that we're still gonna adjust with the final layer. I want to take a look at the layer and just see what parts of it look better. I'm just gonna invert the mask and take a oops. Let's fill that. Oh, I know what the problem is. We still have that selection. I'm gonna delete the selection. Okay, so now we're looking at it. I definitely want to bring a lot more over here. The rocks, I might bring a little bit lighter, but I don't want them to be too bright. I like my images a little on the dark side. So if we just go back and forth a little bit, I'm going to lighten the rocks a little bit. I'm going to probably still going to lighten this foreground part of the water a little bit. It's still pretty dark. Definitely going to lighten this up still. You can get some more reflection here too, which is nice. Alright. Again, the glare over here, I don't want to bring too much of this in, because the glare is going to be a problem. And again, we're working with a sunset that's makes for a much darker scene, and I think leaving these dark feels natural. So, alright, I'm actually not going to start with a luminosity mask here. I don't think we need one, and if you don't need one, it's better not to use one. Sometimes using a luminosity mask when you don't need one can make the results a little unnatural. I am, however, definitely going to bring this way down. So we want very fine adjustments here. I'm going to increase the brush size a bit too. And that's about as far as I'm going to go that way. Definitely want to bring out some of this shadow detail in here. And I know there were some reflections here that I really want to bring out. Just a little bit, not too much. Alright. We're going to go through and lighten this up a bit here. Alright, and we got a little bit of reflection showing. Not too much. We don't want to overdo it, but that looks interesting. All right. I think I'm going to leave this the way it is. Let's see what happens if I bring a little bit. I just don't want it to get that hazy look that we were getting before. I'm not really liking that, so we're gonna just leave that as a silhouette over there. Just gonna put 100% to wipe that out easily. All right, I'll leave it like that. I do want to come back to these rocks and lighten them a bit, especially some of these shadow areas. Get a little bit of detail in there. I do want to prioritize lightening the side that's facing the sunset, just because that feels more natural. I'll just get to work on that. Now, in the process of doing this, I might end up affecting the water around it more than I want to, but again, don't worry too much about that. You can always come in and fix that later. Now I got the silhouettes here of the reflection showing a lot better. I like how that looks. Let's lighten this up a bit. And I do want to come through and just lighten this a bit because I think it's too dark. Some fine adjustments here. Alright. Shadow to show. Alright. So this is looking a lot better. Let me fix this a little bit. Looks like we got a little bit of a halo here that's not too bad. I can fix it pretty easily. Small brush. Alright. I think as far as the blending goes, I think this is pretty good. This image is already starting to really appeal to me. Let me go back, and if we go back and look at just the background, you can see how much detail we brought out. Alright, so the next task is sort of to bring out some of these textures in the rocks, just to highlight them a little bit more, although they are pretty detailed already. There's not a lot, as far as contrast boosting, there's not a lot we want to do. I don't want to do too much contrast in the sky either, because these clouds are pretty dark and heavy. And the highlights here are pretty bright. I do want to push the color separation a little bit. So there's a few ways of doing that. I usually like to work with curves layers, often a way of doing this that I use. I go to curves and pick red. Now what I'm going to do this really exaggerated. Usually when I use an adjustment layer, I will make an extremely exaggerated version of it, and then I mask it out, and with a very fine brush, I come in and paint it back in so that I get only what I want. So let's make the parts that are red. We're going to add red first. It'll add red to everything, but now we're going to pull it out, and we're only adding red to the areas that already have a lot of red. So you can see it's going to mostly influence this area and some of these reflections down here. Maybe not quite that extreme. Again, we're gonna add a curves layer to fix that afterwards. So that's for red. We're gonna do the same thing for blue. What we want is to push the blue, and then and oftentimes when doing this you'll get a strong green cast, which can easily be fixed just by pulling green out of the image. Now this is obviously very extreme, and we don't want the final image to look like this at all. I'm not even 100% sure I'm going to do this with the curves layer yet. Like I said before, I'm doing this in real time. I have not gone through this previously. Sometimes I'll test one way of doing it and I don't like it, and then I'll go and I'll use a different method. But let's just see what happens. So I'm going to invert the mask and switch back over to here. And yeah, we're at 10%, which is really okay. So we basically want to affect just the clouds right now. Yeah, I don't like what I already don't like what this is doing. So let's not do this with the curves layer. At least not that simply. I might make a luminosity mask based on color. Let me see how I want to do this. There's a few different, like I said, there's a few different ways of doing this. I might also add a layer with an overlay blend mode, just to try to bring blue back into some of these other areas. Yeah, let's try. All right, here's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna go and let's just make the layer first. So if we go up to blue, we're just gonna pick sort of a sky blue color, and we're gonna go edit and fill. Now obviously it's gonna do that. Now we're gonna go to overlay, and it's gonna look pretty extreme. So we're going to cut that way back. Somewhere around here. And then we're going to turn this layer off. Back to the channels. And what I want to do is select just the red area so that it's not selecting this. In fact, I think, see if we look at the blue, want to do that. Yeah, we do want the red layer. So let's make a new mask with that. Okay, that was odd. Yeah, let's get something happened with that. Alright. Actually, we don't need this. We don't need to save a mask for that. So we have the red selected right now. Let's go invert it. So now we're selecting everything except for the reddest areas. And with that selected, let's go back to here and let's hide the selection. And then we're going to bring this back and add a mask to it. And you'll see that now we're not affecting the reddest areas. So it's a subtle difference in the sky. Mostly in the dark areas you'll see a color change. So what I'm going to do now is I actually don't want it to affect anything down here or here. So I'm going to leave. I'm going to go over and change this back to black. And we're going to go pretty heavy on this, running 25%. Let's make this bigger. We're just going to paint back over the stuff that we changed that we don't want to change. Pretty much all of this down here. The rock. I think the lower part of the reflection is a little too blue as well. And again, I'm not totally sold on this. I'm just going to switch over to the mask to clean it up. So up here you can see where it's affecting the clouds. That's fine. We definitely don't want it to affect any of this down here. Any of this. Let's actually go to 75. Let's take this a little bit faster. This one, it doesn't have to be precise. If the it's not going to leave a halo the way that blending for like an exposure blend, like what we were doing earlier, will do. I mean, it will leave a halo, but it's not going to be visible. Because these are pretty subtle adjustments. Yeah, so something like that. I'm not going to worry about each individual little tree up there. Alright, so switch that back. So we can see the effect on this. It does add some cool colors. Still not sure that I like it more than the original. I think I'm gonna stick with the original in this case. After all that work, this happens sometimes. You make adjustments and you realize, I don't like that. So we're just gonna leave that the way. We're gonna leave these colors the way they are. I think it's actually better this way. All right, so let's go in and bring some texture detail. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the rocks here. So I have a way of doing this that it's not the same as, I don't know anybody else that does it this way, but this is how I do it. We're going to go into curves, and we don't need any kind of mask for this, because we're gonna change it to a pretty extreme version, and then we're going to mask it out and paint it back in. So I'm going to click on this hand here so that I can see on the graph up here. When I move this over, it shows me the different brightness levels in what I'm looking at. So it looks like in here, the textures, we're looking at, I'm just trying to get an idea of the range of the brightnesses here. All right, and it's probably pretty similar to over here. So what we're going to do is what was the darkest area. We're going to pull that down. It'll be pretty dark. And then the brightest was up here, so we're going to pull that way up. Now it's going to have a pretty extreme effect. Obviously we're not going to keep that. So we're going to go here and invert it, and back to the brush, definitely back to 10% for this. And come over here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to very lightly paint this in. It's just going to add a little bit of contrast detail here. I'm just going to shrink the brush down and come in here a little bit with that. You may get some occasional color changes doing this. It's usually not too much of a problem to work with. Alright, so if I go over here and I turn it on and off, you can see it's got a lot more clarity to it. Alright, so and then we're going to go over and do that to the other one. And it's pretty much the same. It'll be pretty similar. We've got pretty much the same range of brightness levels over here. Again, you don't want to do too much. I'll do a little bit on this little rock too. Not too much here though, because I don't. All right. And now we're going to go and do a similar thing over here on the trees. This is, you have to be careful over here. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go with curves. And actually I should name these. So this is rock contrast. This is trees contrast. And I might do another one elsewhere, so I'm going to call this trees contrast 1. So I'll go here, and this is definitely darker than the other one. Yeah, so there's going to be very little. In fact, I'm probably not going to do any. I might move it in just a tiny bit, but not much. I don't really want to darken much over here. But I do want to bring out detail. You can see how much clarity there is here. Now again, this is way too much. So we're going to invert it and switch back. I'm going to use a larger brush. I don't want to use too small of a brush here. And some of this might be too much, but again, we can come back and edit it afterwards. And again, I don't want to do too much over there. In fact, I already don't like what I'm doing over there, so we're going to get rid of that. Alright. The detail that it was bringing out in this area here. We'll enhance that a little bit. I think we're going to leave it at that. There's definitely room to bring out detail over here, but I don't think I want to. It's not normal for there to be that much contrast with something that far away. I think we just want to leave it relatively low contrast like that. Alright, so I think that's it for the contrast adjustments. Actually, you know what? This one with the trees, I do want to go in up here a little bit and just kind of lighten up some of these patches, because these are pretty dark. I want to be careful not to get into the sky. If I didn't have a choice about the sky, I would probably use a luminosity mask, but I don't think I need to do that here. I think actually that's decent. I'll leave that like that. Alright, So that's pretty much it for the contrast adjustments, well, the curves contrast adjustments. Now there's a couple other tricks that we can do here that I use. There's adding Orton. Orton effect is a really popular way of making the image glow, and there's a technique that has been pioneered by Ryan Dyer. It's his, I call it his dark mood. I'm going to use that here to see how it looks. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what I'm doing because I honestly would rather have you buy his videos where he explains that. I don't want to take away business from Ryan. So I'm going to just kind of go ahead and go through and do that. And we'll see how it looks. All right. So I like the look of it in this case. Sometimes I go through this and I think it looks like junk for some images, but in this case it's subtle. In most of the scene it's subtle. It definitely is having more of an effect on the sky than anywhere else. I definitely like how it looks in this image, so we're going to keep that. And now we're going to do the Orton. Orton's not that complicated. I used to have a really complicated way of doing this that honestly looks worse than the simple way. So first thing we're going to do is make a copy of everything so far in one layer. So I'm going to do Control-Alt-Shift-E, and now we got that layer. And I'm just going to call this Orton. So for the Orton's, yeah, it's a really cool glowy, kind of makes the scene look like it's glowing. It does soften the image a little bit, but it does it in a way where there's still sharp details. So to do that, we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and for this, the number that you're going to put here is different depending on your camera. I use a D800, which is 36 megapixels. It's pretty high. For that, I stick with 40. If you're lower, on the lower end of that, you may want to use a lower number. Basically, if you look at how much blur there is here, this is what you want it to look like. So just kind of drag the slider until you get it to look like this on your image. So we're going to go OK. And we're going to set the opacity to only 15%. So right now, it's just the softening, but it's not adding the glow effect, really. It adds it a little bit, but we're going to make it a lot better. So we're going to go and add a levels. And we want to bind this levels only to the Orton layer. We're not looking to actually change the whole image. We just want to change the Orton layer. So we're going to hold Alt and click on the line between these two. So this will only affect this layer. And then basically we're just going to really, really jack up the contrast. So we bring this down here, bring this way up. You don't want to go too far because you can see what happens if you go too far. But somewhere around here, you can turn the Orton layer on and off to see the effect. liking how that looks. Now, a lot of times when there's bright spots in the image, I like to add a little bit of one little extra glow. And I have another way of doing that. So let's see how that works here. So what we're going to do is, again, create another new layer. I'm going to call this glow. And what we're going to do is let's get rid of all of these old layers that we don't need anymore. So we're going to create a new highlights layer. And let's make a mask of that. And we want to really only select the bright spots. Make another mask. Let's see how that looks. I think we can still do one more brighter. What I'm doing is I'm doing a selection intersection. You hold Control, Alt, Shift, and click. So what I'm doing is I am taking my current selection and saying intersect with this, and since it's the same selection, it's really just going to boost up the contrast of the selection. This should be pretty good. If we look at this, yeah, so we're just gonna basically, these areas are going to be brighter. So we're gonna make a selection of that and then invert the selection. And we're gonna go back to this glow layer and we're gonna hit the delete button. So what that's gonna do is delete everything except for that area. And we're going to set this to screen. So you'll see that it does make those areas brighter, but we're going to do, again, the Gaussian blur on that. Okay, now if we come in here and take a look at that, yeah, now we've definitely got some punch up here in the brightness. It's not going to affect the other areas of the image too much. There's a little bit down here and here, but it's just adds a little more drama to the scene. If it looks like it's too much, it might be a little too much because I am losing some detail up here. So if it's too much, you can always just dial it back a little bit. I think I'll bring it to about right around there. All right, now we have one last step here that I do. Well, there could be several steps. One of them is usually straightening the horizon, but I think we're pretty straight already. That looks straight to me. So we don't need to do that. I don't really see anything overwhelmingly distracting that needs to be removed from the image. So we'll leave that. So we're going to sharpen this now. There's a lot of different ways of sharpening. The way I do it is pretty simple. Again, we're going to go to make another layer. That's a copy. I'll call this sharpening. And we're going to go filter other high pass. This is at 10. This is what I've always kind of left it at. It's going to look really funny, but we're going to switch the blend mode to overlay. Now if we zoom in somewhere, 100%, so you can see here's the original, and the sharpening definitely makes a difference. Sometimes it can be a little intense, but on things like rock textures, it's usually pretty good. I'm not sure I like it in the water here. It's kind of too hard. So we're going to go through and in the sky too. So we're going to add a mask to that and switch to here. And we'll go to 50% of this. And I'm just going to mask out the parts that are in the water and the sky because I don't like what they're doing to that. I like the soft look in the clouds. And you really only have to worry about the parts where there's edges between light and dark. The dark area, the areas that are all light or all dark, are not really going to be affected by the unsharp mask. All right. So that's about it. Yeah. So there we go. You could definitely experiment with trying some other things with the image. Again, a lot of this comes down to personal taste. What you want the image to look like. I've grown to really like images that are dark with dramatic lighting, which is what I'm trying to do with this image here. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. One of the other things that you want to be careful about that I've noticed a lot of times with Lightroom and Photoshop, the color mode is not it's not a color mode that works properly on the web. So I always like to double check, go to convert to profile. This Pro Photo RGB, a lot of times it comes up with this by default, and that's not what we want. What we want is this one here, the sRGB. Sometimes this will make slight changes to the color when you switch, but I don't see anything here. So that should be fine. So I'll go ahead and change that. Oh, you know what? We can't do that actually. Yeah, you have to do that when you export the image, because otherwise it's going to flatten the whole thing. We obviously don't want to flatten this. So we're just going to leave it at that for now. And I just realized I have not saved this since way back in the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and call it the end of the video at this point. So thanks for joining me. I will definitely be doing this again, and my next hiking trip is in a couple weeks. I will be going up Mount Jefferson, possibly visiting some waterfalls, so maybe we'll do some waterfalls next time. So again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.